You hear it before you see it. A tiny scratch behind the stove at 2 in the morning. You flip on the kitchen light and nothing's there, say. Just the smell, and a dark little dropping by the baseboard you didn't notice yesterday. Now picture this instead. A farmhouse kitchen near Berlin, Ohio. No exterminator's truck in the driveway. No snap traps waiting to go off on a kid's finger.
That family hasn't seen a mouse inside their kitchen in 11 years, and the only tool that got them there cost about $1 to build. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what's in that kitchen.
Why it works when a $40 box of poison from the hardware store often doesn't.
And the 9-day sequence that can take a house from infested to clear place, without a single chemical and without a single trap snapping shut. Stay with me, because the part most people get wrong isn't the trap. It's the door the mice are walking through every single night, the one nobody ever thinks to close.
Before anything else, I want to set the record straight, because this topic gets people hurt when it's handled carelessly.
Mice are not just an inconvenience. They carry real, documented risks: hantavirus from disturbed droppings, salmonella contamination in food storage, and chewed wiring that the National Fire Protection Association has linked to a meaningful share of unexplained residential electrical fires every year. This is not a video about ignoring an infestation or trusting folklore over your family's safety.
Everything in here is something you can do safely, in a weekend, with materials from a hardware store. But there's one safety note near the end about cleaning up heavy infestations that I need you to actually hear, so don't skip out early.
Let's start with the number that should bother you. The National Pest Management Association estimates that mice and rats invade tens of millions of American homes every single year.
And that's homes that report it. And the real number is almost certainly higher, because most people don't call anyone until the problem is already out of control.
The average household dealing with a rodent issue spends somewhere between $200 and $600 a year on traps, on
Bait stations, and eventually a pest control contract, and a meaningful share of those households are still dealing with activity a year later.
That's not a typo. You can spend real money on this problem for years and still hear scratching in the wall.
Why does that happen? It's not because the products don't work at all.
It's because almost everything sold to you addresses the mouse that's already in your kitchen tonight.
And does nothing about the 11 mice that haven't found their way in yet. You're not actually solving an infestation.
You're running a very expensive game of whack-a-mole, and the mole keeps coming back because nobody ever closed the hole it crawls out of.
I spent time with a few Amish families in Holmes County, Ohio, who don't run that game at all.
Their kitchens stay clear for years, not because they have some secret poison nobody else has access to,
but because their entire approach is built on understanding how a mouse actually thinks.
Not just how to kill the one in front of you. So let's talk about that, because this is the part that changes everything else in this video.
Mice have a behavior trait called neophobia, a documented, well-studied fear of new objects in a familiar environment. If you drop a brand new snap trap into a kitchen where a mouse has been living comfortably for 2 weeks, that mouse will very often walk around it, sometimes for days, before it ever approaches. Meanwhile, it's still in your cereal box.
It's still leaving droppings in your silverware drawer. You bought the right tool, you placed it correctly, and the mouse outsmarted it just by being suspicious of anything that wasn't there yesterday.
This single fact explains almost every frustrated comment you've ever read on a hardware store product page. Didn't work for me. House mice walked right past it. It's not that the trap is broken. It's that the mouse's instincts are older and better tuned than the marketing copy on the box.
The Amish families I talked to use a tool that works with that instinct instead of against it. It's called a bucket and ramp trap. And versions of it have been built in rural American households for generations, long before plastic snap traps were sold in any store.
Here's exactly how to build it, and I'm going to walk through every single piece so you can build this today.
With materials you probably already have or can get for under $5 total. You need a 5-gallon bucket, Stowe, the kind you'd find in any garage or under a kitchen sink.
You need a thin wooden dowel or a wire coat hanger straightened out completely. You need a small empty can, a soup can, or a tuna can works fine.
You need peanut butter, and you need about 1/3 of a cup of water for the bottom of the bucket.
Drill a small hole through the top rim of the bucket, directly across from another hole on the opposite side. Run your dowel or straightened hanger through both holes so it sits like an axle, suspended just above the bucket's opening, parallel to the ground. Slide the can onto that dowel so it sits in the middle and spins freely, like a rolling pin balanced on an axle.
Now smear peanut butter generously around the outside of that can.
Last step to mourn. Lean a thin board or a flat piece of scrap wood against the outside of the bucket.
Angled so it reaches from the ground up to the rim, like a ramp a mouse can climb. That's the entire build. 5 minutes, $5, no batteries, no electricity, nothing to plug in. Here's what happens overnight. A common house mouse smells the peanut butter from across the room, and remember, their sense of smell is far sharper than ours.
Which is part of why this works so well as bait.
It climbs the ramp you built, reaches the rim of the bucket, and steps out onto the can to get closer to the peanut butter. The can spins the instant it puts weight on it, because it's resting loosely on that axle with nothing to grip. The mouse loses its footing immediately and drops straight down into the bucket. Now,
About that water in the bottom straw, I want to be completely transparent here because there are 2 ways people run this trap. And you should choose based on what you're comfortable with.
Some households use a few inches of water specifically so a mouse can't jump back out and escape before morning.
other households skip the water entirely, use just an empty bucket, and simply release whatever they catch outside, far from the house, the next morning. Both versions work for trapping. Which one you choose is entirely a personal decision.
And there's no wrong answer here as long as you're consistent about checking the trap every single morning.
Why does this outperform a snap trap for an actual ongoing infestation, not just a single mouse?
Because you can catch several mice in the same bucket overnight without resetting anything in between. A snap trap catches one mouse,
And then you have to reset it, rebait it, and put it back exactly where it was, and that disturbance
at handling, often restarts the neophobia clock all over again for any mice nearby that witnessed or smelled the disruption.
The bucket just sits there. Night after night, it looks exactly the same. To a field mouse's brain, after the first encounter or two, it stops registering as a threat at all, which is precisely the moment it becomes most effective.
But here's the truth that the bucket alone can't fix, and it's the part almost every pest control visit skips entirely.
Because closing it permanently isn't a billable service you can repeat every quarter.
The bucket only catches the mice that are already inside your house tonight.
It does absolutely nothing about tomorrow night's mice unless you also close the door they're using to get in.
And that door is smaller than you think. A mouse can squeeze through an opening the width of a standard pencil.
That's not an exaggeration for dramatic effect. It's a documented fact in wildlife biology.
The limiting factor isn't a mouse's body, which is remarkably compressible.
It's the width of its skull, and an adult mouse's skull is genuinely close to the diameter of a pencil.
That means almost every home in America has several openings exactly that size or larger, and most homeowners have never once looked for them.
So let's go find yours. Grab a flashlight, and do this walk at dusk specifically.
Because gaps and openings show up far more clearly as shadows and slivers of light at that time of day than they do under flat daytime sun.
Start at your dryer vent. This is, by a wide margin, one of the single most common entry points in an average American home. The plastic or metal flap that's supposed to keep the outside world out weakens with age, warps in the heat,
And within a few years often lifts with almost no resistance at all. Push on it gently with one finger. If it lifts easily for you, it lifts easily for a mouse using its nose.
Move to every spot where a utility line enters your house, where your water main comes through the foundation, where your gas line enters, where your electrical service and cable lines punch through the wall. Builders cut these openings to fit the pipe or conduit snugly when the house was new, but houses settle, materials shrink, and caulking degrades over years.
Almost every one of these penetrations develops a gap over time, and every single gap is a mouse-sized doorway.
Check your garage door seal next. The rubber sweep along the bottom warps with repeated heat cycles, and by year 5 to 7 of a garage door's life,
It's common to find gaps half an inch wide or more along sections of that seal daylight through if you crouch down and look.
check your basement window wells, your crawl space vents, and any spot where your home's siding has a visible seam or crack near ground level.
Old foundations especially tend to develop hairline cracks over decades that widen just enough season after season. Once you've found your gaps, and I promise you,
Almost everyone who does this walk finds more than they expected braid. Here's how you close them permanently.
Using a material that costs about $4 and that mice fundamentally cannot get through. Steel wool. It's not exotic. It's not a secret ingredient. It works because mice can chew through wood, drywall, plastic, foam sealant. Pack it into the gap tightly, leaving no loose edge for a mouse to grab and start pulling at.
Because a loose edge is an invitation, while a tightly packed wad is a wall. For larger gaps, a combination works even better. Pack the steel wool in first to physically block the opening, then seal over it with a paintable caulk or expanding foam to weatherproof the area and lock the steel wool in place permanently.
do every gap you found on your dusk walk. For an average home, this entire project costs under $20 in materials and takes one afternoon.
Now here's the ingredient that the family near Berlin told me made the real difference sites. Not in catching the mice that were already inside, but in keeping new ones from ever wanting to try the door in the first place. Peppermint. Mice navigate their world almost entirely through smell. Their olfactory sense is dramatically more sensitive than ours, which is exactly why scents that barely register to a human can be genuinely overwhelming and disorienting to a mouse. Peppermint oil is one of the most consistently reported natural deterrents in this category.
I want to be honest with you about what that means, Trey. It is not a force field.
And no scent on earth will stop every single mouse every single time forever. But it is a real,
low-cost layer of defense that meaningfully reduces activity when it's part of a complete approach, rather than treated as a magic standalone solution.
Here's how to use it correctly. Soak cotton balls thoroughly in peppermint essential oil. Tuck them into the same gaps you just sealed with steel wool. Into the back corners of cabinets.
Behind major appliances like your refrigerator and stove,
and along the sill plate in your basement where the wooden frame of your house meets the concrete foundation. That's a common travel route most homeowners never think to check.
Refresh these cotton balls every 2 to 3 weeks, because the scent fades steadily and a dried out cotton ball does nothing.
To be clear about sequencing, because this matters, peppermint is not a replacement for sealing your gaps with steel wool.
It's a second layer placed on top of a house that's already been sealed.
Used alone, without sealing entry points, it's a minor deterrent at best.
Combined with sealed gaps, it adds a real margin of extra protection, and the entire supply costs around $6 and lasts for months.
Let's put this all together into the actual 9-day sequence, because the sequence matters more than any single ingredient on its own. Day 1, walk your home at dusk and identify every gap, then seal every one you find with steel wool, reinforced with caulk where needed. Same evening, day 1, set 2 to 3 bucket traps along the walls in the rooms where you've actually seen droppings or activity.
Because mice travel along walls and baseboards almost exclusively, they rarely cross open floor space, since that exposes them to predators.
Days 2 through 5. Check your bucket traps every single morning without exception.
Release or dispose of whatever you've caught according to whichever method you chose, and rebait with fresh peanut butter each time.
This is also the window to place your peppermint cotton balls in the sealed gaps and in any cabinet corners showing signs of activity.
By day 6 or 7, most of the deer mice that were already living inside your house have been caught in the buckets.
Simply because there's nowhere left for replacement house mice to enter and take their place. By day 9,
The great majority of households following this sequence report no new droppings, no new sightings, and no new sounds in the walls at night.
That's not because every mouse within a mile of your property vanished.
It's because the ones that were inside are gone, and the door behind them has been shut.
This is the part that store-bought poison fundamentally cannot do, no matter how strong it is or how many boxes you buy. A bait station kills the individual mouse that eats from it. It does absolutely nothing about the gap behind your dryer vent that let that common house mouse in, or the next common house mouse, or the one after that. You can buy poison every single month for the rest of your life and never once address the actual physical hole in your house that's been quietly inviting mice in the entire time.
The families who've kept mouse-free kitchens for decades aren't relying on anything mystical or secret. They're doing the unglamorous, the repeatable work trad. Seal the house completely, remove what's already inside, and keep checking for a couple of weeks until the activity genuinely stops.
Now, if you already live in your house, and you're thinking this only really applies to a farmhouse or to someone with crawl space access,
Stay with me, because this next stretch is specifically for people in an ordinary suburban home, a rental, an apartment building,
or anywhere with shared walls.
In an apartment or a duplex, your entry points often aren't your own gaps at all. They're your neighbors. Mice travel through shared wall cavities, through gaps around shared plumbing stacks, and through utility chases that run between units in a building.
If you're sealing your own unit perfectly, but the unit next to you has an open dryer vent or an unsealed pipe penetration,
You can still have activity because the mouse simply enters through their gap and travels the wall cavity into yours.
if you live in a multi-unit building and this sequence doesn't fully resolve your activity within a couple of weeks.
It's worth talking to your landlord or property manager about a building-wide gap inspection.
Because an individual unit's ceiling can only do so much when the structure itself is shared.
For a standard single-family suburban home, the sequence above is usually complete on its own.
But there are a few additional spots specific to suburban construction worth checking that rural farmhouses don't always have.
Check your attic access hatch and the gap around any recessed lighting fixtures that connect your living space to the attic.
And they're rarely sealed tightly from the factory.
Check around your HVA ductwork where it penetrates floors and walls, since flexible ductwork installations often leave gaps that builders never went back to seal properly. Let's talk about prevention going forward, because closing this round of activity is only half the picture. Mice are drawn to a house for exactly 3 reasons: food, water, and shelter from weather and predators.
You've just dealt with shelter by sealing the gaps. The other 2 are worth a few minutes of attention because they determine whether a new infestation starts building again 6 months from now. On food, store dry goods like flour, cereal, oats,
And rice in sealed glass or hard plastic containers, rather than their original cardboard or thin plastic packaging,
which a mouse can chew through in seconds. Wipe down counters and stovetops nightly, because mice can survive on crumbs that are genuinely too small for a human eye to notice during a quick glance. Take pet food up off the floor overnight rather than leaving a full bowl out continuously, since an open bowl of dry kibble is, from a mouse's perspective, an unlimited buffet sitting at floor level all night long. On water, fix any small leaks under sinks promptly.
even slow drips that you've been putting off, because a consistent water source is just as attractive to a mouse as a food source.
sometimes more so in a house that's otherwise well sealed. On shelter, do a seasonal version of your dust gap check.
Ideally once in early fall and once in early spring, because materials expand and contract with temperature swings throughout the year.
And a seal that held perfectly last spring can develop a small gap by the time autumn comes around. This is exactly why families who've stayed mouse-free for over a decade aren't just doing one big project once, Pat. They're doing a small, 15-minute check twice a year, forever, the same way you'd check smoke detector batteries. I want to spend a few minutes now on something almost nobody talks about in pest control content.
And it's specifically about heavy or long neglected infestations. Because if your situation has gone on for months or longer,
There's a step you absolutely cannot skip, and skipping it is genuinely dangerous. If you ever find a large accumulation of dried droppings, nesting material, or evidence of a heavy, long-term infestation in an enclosed space, an attic, a crawl space behind a wall you've opened up,
inside an old shed, do not go in and dry sweep or vacuum it without preparation.
there's a step you absolutely cannot skip, and skipping it is genuinely dangerous. If you ever find a large accumulation of dried droppings, nesting material, or evidence of a heavy, long-term infestation in an enclosed space, an attic, a crawl space behind a wall you've opened up,
Inside an old shed, do not go in and dry sweep or vacuum it without preparation.
Disturbed rodent droppings and nesting material can release airborne particles that carry hantavirus.
And the Centers for Disease Control specifically recommends that you do not stir up dust in these situations. Instead,
before any cleanup,
thoroughly wet the entire area down with a disinfectant solution. A mixture of water and bleach is commonly recommended at a ratio.
And wear a properly fitted respirator mask rather than a thin paper dust mask while you clean.
ventilate the space by opening windows for at least 30 minutes before you start, if that's possible.
This single piece of safety information is worth more than every trick in this entire video combined.
And I'd genuinely rather you remember this one paragraph than anything else here if you only remember one thing. Coda breed face struck, and in that rat. Let's talk about rats for a minute.
Because a meaningful number of you watching this actually have a rat problem and have been calling it a mouse problem.
And the difference matters for how you respond. Norway rats and roof rats are both common across the United States,
and they're considerably larger and more cautious than house mice, which means the bucket trap needs slight adjustments to work on them.
For rats, you want a larger 5-gallon bucket rather than a smaller container, a sturdier dowel that can support more weight without bending, and you'll generally want to use water in the bottom rather than the dry version.
Because rats are strong enough and motivated enough to climb a dry bucket wall in a way a mouse simply cannot.
Rats are also considerably more neophobic than mice. They're famous among wildlife biologists for being suspicious of new objects for a week or more before approaching them.
So if you're dealing with rats specifically, expect this whole sequence to take closer to 2 to 3 weeks rather than 9 days.
And don't get discouraged if the first several nights produce nothing. Persistence is the entire game with rats. The sealing principles are identical, just sized up raid. A black rat can fit through an opening about the size of a quarter, which is larger than the pencil width gap for mice. But the steel wool and caulk method works exactly the same way, just with a thicker wad of material.
I want to address something else directly, because I know it's sitting in the back of some of your minds.
Why doesn't this get talked about more if it's this simple and this cheap? I don't think it's some grand conspiracy with a boardroom full of executives plotting against homeowners.
I think it's simpler and a little more mundane than that. A bag of steel wool doesn't have a sales rep.
Nobody earns a commission walking you through a dusk inspection of your own foundation.
There's no quarterly contract to upsell on a $5 bucket trap. The information isn't hidden so much as it's just commercially uninteresting to spread, compared to a product with a marketing budget behind it.
That's worth understanding, because it applies to a lot more than mice bait. Anywhere a free, durable fix exists alongside a paid,
recurring one, you should expect the paid one to get more airtime, not because it's better, but because someone's incentivized to talk about it.
Before we wrap up, let me run through the mistakes that trip people up most.
Because I've seen every one of these in comment sections.
And avoiding them is the difference between this working in 9 days and this dragging out for 2 months. Mistake 1, sealing the easy gaps and skipping the hard ones. People will happily pack steel wool into a dryer vent because it's at eye level and easy to reach. Then skip the gap behind a built-in bookshelf or under a kitchen island because it requires moving furniture.
Mice don't care which gaps are convenient for you to reach.
If you skip one, the whole project underperforms because one open door is enough.
Mistake 2. Giving up on the bucket trap after 2 quiet nights.
Remember the neophobia point from earlier? Some mice take 3, 4, even 5 nights before they trust a new object enough to approach it.
2 empty mornings does not mean the trap failed. It often means it's working exactly on schedule.
Mistake 3. Using old, rancid peanut butter as bait and wondering why nothing's interested. Fresh bait matters.
A mouse's sense of smell can detect freshness, and a jar that's been sitting open for 2 weeks loses a lot of its pull.
Use a fresh smear every few days, not once and forget it. Mistake 4, relying on peppermint oil alone, with no sealing behind it.
I mentioned this earlier, but it's worth repeating because it's the single most common shortcut people try.
Peppermint without sealed gaps is like spraying air freshener at an open door, and it helps a little, but the door is still open. Mistake 5, not checking attics and crawl spaces as part of the gap walk.
Most people only inspect what's visible at ground level walking around the outside of the house and skip the foundation vents,
The soffit gaps under the roofline, and the attic gable vents, all of which are common, overlooked entry points, especially in older construction. Let me answer a few questions that come up constantly whenever this topic comes up. Is it safe around pets? Steel wool and caulk sitting inside a sealed wall gap pose no risk to a curious German Shepherd or Siamese cat, since they're not edible and not exposed once sealed properly. Peanut butter bait in a bucket trap is generally fine.
but if your dog, a golden retriever, can physically reach and tip the bucket, place your trap somewhere your pet can't access, like behind furniture or in a utility closet with the door cracked just enough for a mouse but not your dog.
Does this work in winter? Yes, and in a lot of climates it's actually more effective in winter.
Because mice are pushed indoors by cold weather